Hello.
Good evening, Graham. Good evening, Anthony.
Hello, Charles.
Anyway, welcome. I'm Charles Hutchinson, the late calling Charles Hutchinson, fellow podcaster, Two Big Egos in a Small Car with Graham Chalmers. I write pieces on the Charles Hutch Press website. I contribute to the York Press newspaper still and to York Radio. And here's what Graham does on a regular basis.
Oh, well, we're both journalists who've written about the arts for about 40 years, and you've probably seen more shows across Yorkshire than any other single critic in that time.
I think Phil Penfold might beat me for that.
Possibly, yeah. On top of that, we've both lived a life of experience in the arts.
Yes.
On top of that, I used to have my own music magazine in my spare time, and I've organised lots of arts events and lots of gigs with Gruff Rhys and Wild Beasts and Field Music and Julian Cope. And I still work for the Harrogate Advertiser, and I still write about the arts, even though journalism, especially in local press, is definitely in decline.
Yes, one could get depressed about that, but actually one of the joys of getting together on a Sunday to talk things through is there is still so much to champion within the arts world. And I just think it's a broader spectrum now of where you get your arts coverage. You still have very strong arts coverage in some of the national newspapers, and that long may that continue. And on local websites too, you will find reviews of concerts, etc. But I think increasingly podcasts are becoming maybe the definitive experience because they're broad ranging, but at the same time, you'll then get topics that are very specific within them in a lot of detail, which is what local newspapers probably don't do in the way that they used to. That's where we, I think, now fill a role, not just us, but other podcasts too.
Yeah, the difference, of course, that newspapers have rules and ethics about what they do, unless, of course, the national newspapers. But in a podcast is a first-person thing, and though it may be factually based, it's still first person. I mean, I think Two Big Egos and a Small Car is basically like BBC Radio 4's Front Row with an edge.
Well, a painful front row seat that's got a chainsaw on it.
Oh, come on. I definitely see things that they would not see on BBC Radio 4's Front Row.
Absolutely.
And you do occasionally as well, because they all bend over backwards not to, in any way have anybody disagreeing with them, which doesn't make for good criticism.
And it's interesting to see that national newspapers can still make decisions that are absolutely extraordinary and baffling. I was listening to TalkSport this morning to Henry Winter, who has been made redundant from his post as the chief football correspondent of the Times. 5 million people have taken to social media to read about it. 4,000 comments, including people like Emily Maitlis. Utterly extraordinary decision. He's already been given 5 job offers to go elsewhere. Tells you that instead of a winter of discontent, which is what actually everyone is feeling, he's going to take a new opportunity. But that's the kind of situation you've got in national journalism that makes you think, what on earth is the thinking?
You got to use the old cliche, it's an own goal.
They've made him redundant.
Awful. But let's move on from that sad news onto tonight's topics.
Yeah, let's go deep to. You and I have both interviewed Steve Howe to do with Yes playing at the York Barbican, and I was warned. I was counselled and advised to be very switched on to knowing my subject, and which is always a bit unnerving before you've even interviewed someone. So anyway, Graham, we'll probably come on to my experience, but let's talk about yours first, because I think you did, which we've covered in the podcast before. I'm not saying putting your foot in it, but unintentionally stirring a conversation in a direction that he might have reacted to differently.
I interviewed him recently, and I've had a good phase of interviews recently, thanks to the Harrogate Advertiser. And I'm going to name drop like crazy here, just to show that I really have got a big ego.
Yeah, go on.
So in the last couple of weeks, I've interviewed Steve Howe of Yes, a great prog rock band. I've interviewed Sir Ed Davey, the leader of Lib Dem Party. And I've interviewed Gareth Southgate, the England football manager. So,
who lives locally.
Yeah. But he was doing an event at Martin House Children's Hospice to raise funds towards a brand new massive extension. But anyway, Steve Howe, who I interviewed in 2018, and it went perfectly fine. I then interviewed him again a couple of weeks ago,
Mm.
because Yes are playing York Barbican again on Tuesday, May the 28th.
Yeah.
And I love Yes, especially the great 70s prog rock albums like the Yes album and Close to the Edge and Real Air. But they're touring under the banner of Classic Tales of Yes. It's a European and British tour. And I was asked by the PR person to talk mainly about their ambitious double album from 1973, Tales from Topographic Oceans, which is still, even though its reputation has improved in recent years, it's still a bit a Marmite album in the sense that it's blamed for a lot of the excesses of prog rock and why prog rock eventually declined. And I was also told to mention Yes's recent album, Mirror to the Sky, which is actually quite a good album. Sounds fairly modern and it's high quality. So I thought, I'm looking forward to these. So I thought, well, I need to mention Tales from Topographic Oceans quite quickly. So
Yeah.
I told them what my experience had been, which is that when I was having lots of tramadol after a hip operation,
Yeah.
I played Tales from Topographic Oceans for the first time, and I played it to death, and I couldn't quite get it. But then I played it recently, and I did get it, and I said, but it's still quite a controversial album. And I mentioned the tracks that I mentioned the reasons I thought that it was still controversial. I said, well, for kickoff, it sounds like the keyboards were not an intrinsic part of the songs. They were sort of bolted on afterwards. And he got really angry and started saying, like, why is everybody obsessed with Tales from the Topographic Ocean not being very good? And if Rick Wakeman didn't want to play on the album, he didn't have to play. And I thought, oh dear. so then I moved on to something else to do with Tales, and that went totally wrong. Then I thought, well, I'll talk about the influences of Yes early on, because Steve Howe came from like the mid 60s and the Flower period originally. Yeah. And you can tell that a lot of the guitar stuff is sort of like influenced by Abbey Road, the Beatles album. And yes, we're big Beatles fans. And by George Harrison's guitar playing and his style of construction of solos. So I brought that up, and he took that as some sort of insult that I was talking about how he only existed because of George Harrison. So I thought, oh, I need to backtrack for this one quickly as well. So it was like, no matter what I asked him, he was going to find some sort of problem. There was some sort of implied insult was going to be found no matter what I said. So straight into Phil Grover mode after that, because I think he's great.
So do you maybe feel that you don't really know how?
I was lacking know-how in how to deal with how.
I mean, I think these interviews, when these things happen, and you and I have done interviews for so many years, and I'm not saying that, you set tripwires and whatever, but, the part of the job of the interviewer is not actually just to give a cozy time. You want them to think about things, maybe to think freshly about something that they haven't thought about that way before. That's where an interview should be stimulating. I like it when at the end of an interview, and in the interview he says, really enjoyed that, Charles, because I wasn't expecting those questions, or I hadn't expected to go in that direction. And I'm not, and I think that's not me flattering myself. That's just because I think years and years of experience, I think it gives us the opportunity to ask things through knowledge and through experience. And because often, actually, we've interviewed someone more than once. So you want to keep giving stimulating interviews in that situation where it's not just the obvious questions.
Yeah, but you must remember the vast majority of journalists don't ask anything but obvious questions and don't actually know the subject they're talking about particularly. So the default setting of almost all famous musicians must be that when they get interviewed by a journalist, that the journalist probably doesn't know very much about them. So they're sort of they're on their guard anyway, really, in general. Not always, but in general they are. I think Steve Harley was good to interview, ironically, because he started off as a journalist. And so I think he understood
he did.
what journalists did. Although he wasn't like that in the 70s, obviously. He's supposedly very hard work.
If someone puts themselves up for an interview, I think they've got to be open-minded.
Well, I think so as well, but I was going to talk about the lineup of Yes now, which, in terms of original members of the band, there's only Steve Howe left. When I say original, he wasn't I don't think he was at the very beginning. But anyway, it's a good lineup. And I was going to say, you're the only original one left, but the rest of the lineup was at least two members who've been in the band longer than the original lineup. Yeah. So it's actually a really strong lineup. And I thought, I can't possibly ask that question now because he will take that as I'm trying to insult him again. So I thought, I'm just not going to bother with that one. Let's not mention the lineup. He's going to kill me for that. So I didn't bother mentioning that.
Did you dare mention John Anderson?
No, this is the annoying thing, because if I'd started by talking about John Anderson, he would have had every right to be slightly annoyed, but only slightly. But I didn't even bring Johnson up. Went nowhere near it. Honestly,
I mean, I only
Steve,
mentioned it in passing, saying that that there's been more than one version of Yes that have passed through the York Barbican in recent years. One who call themselves Yes, and one who use a load of brackets to explain that they are actually Yes, but they can't call themselves Yes, as in the John Anderson.
But Steve Howe, interviewing Steve Howe it made interviewing the Stranglers' Hugh Cornwall made him look like a pussycat.
Yeah. Was there a get out of jail card with that one?
What, Steve Howe?
No. Hugh Cornwall.
Oh,
Keep
yeah,
up.
because he was jailed, wasn't he? Sorry, he was jailed a long, long time ago, Hugh Cornwall, yeah.
Keep up. Keep up.
I bet you he wasn't bullied in prison.
No, definitely not. So anyway, just remind our listeners of when this concert by Yes is in York in the York Barbican.
Tuesday, May the 28th, and this is a band who've influenced Radiohead a lot and Mars Volta and quite a few other bands. And I can't see how Yes will keep on touring that much longer. So it's a rare chance to see them play some fantastic music.
Will you be going to the gig?
Yeah, I hope
You'll be
so.
Going? Yeah.
Well, I hope so. I'm
just checking in case Steve Howe's removed you from the guest list. I'm not sure.
I'm not sure he put me on.
Now, Graham, time for an interruption, I think.
Well, there's lots of great albums coming out. For example, Vampire Weekend. It's been a good year for albums so far. The latest good one to come out is Only God Above Us. Only God was above us, rather, and it's their fifth album.
When did they last release an album?
It was 2019, not that long ago in the current scheme of things. Father of the Bride, where it was basically Ezra Koenig cracked on his own without much of the rest of Vampire Weekend, and that was a brilliant album. It was very poppy. It didn't attempt to be anything like the original Vampire Weekend, and I thought it was an excellent album, and showed up his songwriting, which is really strong songwriting. So Only God Was Above Us has got 3 original members of Vampire Weekend in it. And at times, and I say it loosely at times, probably 2 songs sound like the original Vampire Weekend.
I've only played it once on Spotify, and excuse me, swear word Spotify there, but and that was my instant reaction. Oh, some of these do sound like early days of Vampire Weekend.
But they're vastly, they're vastly swamped by numbers that sound like they came from the third album, Modern Vampires of the City, when they started to get very baroque and ornate and rococo, very beautiful, sort of like semi-classical music with a mild influence of trip hop, very mild. Whereas this one has got a bit of that, it's got a bit of early Vampire Weekend, and it's also got a couple of tracks which sound like nothing done before, which is quite welcome to hear, because when I heard the tracks that sounded like Modern Vampires of the City, they were very good tracks, but I thought, this is the first time I've played a Vampire Weekend album and thought, I've heard this before. Usually it's a progression every album, or it's a big change every album. And this time I thought, oh, that's a great track, but I've heard that before. Oh, that's a very good track, but I've heard that before. So it is a very good album, but I'm beginning to think Vampire Weekend may be coming towards the end of their
so it's no longer an Oxford comma, Graham. It could be no longer an Oxford comma, but an Oxford full stop.
It could be, Charles, but my track record in predicting this sort of thing is a bit sketchy. I did once review U2, which ended up in the Harrogate Advertiser around here Park about 1992 or 93.
Were you calling time on them?
Yeah, I thought they were going to split up.
32 years ago.
Yeah. So if we're still doing Two Big U's in a Small Car in 20 years' time, we'll probably be reviewing Vampire Weekend's 11th album.
Yeah. Can I just mention a gig in passing that I went to? Benjamin Francis Leftwich. Yeah, which was the
Benjamin left the old sandwich.
Oh, that's the one.
We've interviewed him before.
Playing. Well, of course, there are two rooms at the Brudenell Social Club, and Ben was playing in, I think it's called the community room.
Oh yes.
And so he played with Jamie Squire of which band, Graham?
Oh, Jamie Squire. I thought you said John Squire. I was going to say that's an unlikely
Jamie Squire.
Unlikely duo with seahorses. I don't actually know who Jamie Squire is. Who is
he? He's keyboards predominantly and some guitar for the 1975. For whom Ben, the
Oh
latest
wow.
album by the 1975 has Ben has done, I think, a couple of co-writes for that. So it
Oh
was the
yeah,
two
that's
of
good.
them, and the tour manager actually is a former member now of the Howl and the Hum in York, which
Oh yeah.
Bradley. And so you've got Ben does gigs, I think, like no one else in the use of atmosphere and
Mm.
control. And so he doesn't
Mm.
come onto a great hula la. There isn't music playing to herald his arrival as if it's into a boxing ring.
Mm.
It's instant hush and an audience that knows this. He's got a very knowledgeable
Oh
audience.
wow. Mm.
And I don't want to use the word respect because that's not really what I mean. But there is that thing, you know how at gigs people can have a tendency to chat through certain things.
Chat.
It doesn't happen with.
Indeed.
And I mean, I've
Really?
even been
That is
told
a
to shut up. I've even been
that's
told
a
to shut up when I was enthusing about Ocean
come on, Charles.
when Echo and the
You've been
Bunnymen
told
played
shut up
Ocean
quite a
Rain,
few
and I said
times.
what a brilliant song it was, and they just said, "Well, if it's so brilliant, could you shut up?"
You seem to attract that,
and I
Charles,
said,
for some
and I
reason. I
said,
don't know
fair
why.
point.
Mm.
But with Ben,
But yeah, to get hush at a gig right through is very rare.
it is extraordinary, and he even makes a point of thanking people for doing that. So, of course, on his latest album, fifth album, the part of the significance of this album is it's called Some Things Break. And you might think, well, Ben often addresses, difficulties in relationships, difficulties in coping with life, and this still has that in it as well. But ultimately, there's a push for hope, I think, within it, and that's important.
Mm.
It's future looking in that way. The other thing that he's done that's very significant is that he has decided to sing certain songs in a lower register,
Mm.
and what that does,
Oh.
I think, is maybe, and I don't think it's intentional, nudge him a little bit closer to what gets airplay on things like Virgin Chilled. And I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing. I'm not necessarily saying it's a good thing. I'm not
Are
saying
we
that the
talking?
record company, Dirty Hit
Yeah.
Records,
Mm,
have
I
suggested
get
it
it.
might be a good idea to do, be
Are we
like Lewis
talking
Capaldi.
everything but the girl?
I
Are we
don't
talking
think we
everything?
are talking that. I think it's
Okay.
more
Okay.
that the
Mm.
singer-songwriters, for which I think he's right up there amongst the very best of the solo singer-songwriters.
Yeah.
There's just I mean, I think he'd probably shoot me down with Ben for saying this, but I just wonder whether there's a hint of pushing towards that market that's very strongly there, and I call it the Lewis Capaldi market or whatever. In the confessional tone of the songs, with the
Yeah.
deeper voice. And
Mm.
it may just be that the song suited that, and also because Ben started having albums at the age of 21, and he's now 33, I think Ben has now turned.
Mm. Mm.
So the voices thicken and mature. That does happen. I thought it was as beautiful a concert as I've seen. He does that magically and wonderfully. He has a lovely moment in each concert where he steps in front of the microphone, comes to the front of the
Mm.
stage, the lip of the stage,
Mm.
acoustic
Mm.
guitar, just him. Silence is there already, and he sings in a very hushed way.
Mm.
And to have that power and control with an audience in those moments, that's something that's very special in his concerts when he does that.
Mm.
So
Mm.
I thought, it was a night of joy, a night of revelation, as ever with Ben. Beautiful guitar playing, and I have to say that the work of Jamie Squire with him was absolutely gorgeous on the keyboards, and a hint of steel guitar at one point as well. And I thought this was as strong a set as I've seen Ben play ever. So I loved it as a gig, and so
That's
it was
good to
good to
see.
see him in that form.
Because
And just
he's been through his
oh,
troubles, so
absolutely,
it's nice to see him actually better than ever on stage.
absolutely, and of course he addresses that. He addresses. I don't want to call it demons because I don't think that's fair to
Mm.
say that, but the
Yeah,
difficulties that were brought on by the loss of his
bit of a
father.
cliched word anyway. Demons.
Yeah, it is, and one of the songs is a conversation to his late father, set in I think New York from memory that it's set, and utterly moving and just beautifully done, very observational, in the way that, and I'm not in any way comparing him with Leonard Cohen, but there is that
Mm.
stillness about when he sings certain songs that draws you in, and of course. Ben, as we know from when we've interviewed him, is a writer of beautiful, moving lyrics. So a beautiful concert, and happy to report that. And just to say,
that's
Ben,
good. That's good.
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, and you'll be able to see Ben in York performing. He's going to be opening the show when Jack, what's he called? Jack, not Pavarotti. What's his name?
Savaratti.
Yeah, Jack Savaratti is going to be
I've
playing.
interviewed him. He's a very nice chap.
He's
a very nice chap, Jack.
Yeah, and so he's coming to play in the 4 nights of concerts in the Museum Gardens. First night's Jack Savaretti, and I think from memory, July 18th, I think. Then you got Shed 7 2 nights, and then the last night is Sugar Babes. This is all being run by Future Sound, and we're going to. I might even be looking to sort of do a focus on that event, because I think it's a really good thing that York's doing a concert like that. So anyway, Graham, let's talk about a nervous experience that you had. I mean, this is the writer's nightmare, I think. I can't think of a worse thing than you have nearly finished writing a book, and then suddenly it looks like it might have vanished. What on earth happened?
Well, the thing is, when I started writing the book about Christmas, more than a year of interviews with Chris himself. At that point, was a very young 75 from the 60s onwards, and about his music and all his life, packed with contemplative, very intelligent, very subtle, very melodic songs about nature and life and love and how times change and how people change. It's really quietly deep stuff, without ever sounding melodramatic. He doesn't really do melodrama. And so I started a bit thinking, this is going to be quite straightforward, until I got to the point where I realized that his memory, like anybody's over the decades, wasn't entirely in line with some of the dates that I'm going to have to change my approach to this book. Yeah. So it became a slow process, and then I got back last year and a bit of an antique laptop fixing it. And it was starting to misfire a bit, but I thought, well, again, no problem. Until it not only misfired, it actually wouldn't start. So the laptop was like a dead planet. Like there's no light, there's no power was getting to it, nothing. So I thought, oh my good God, because being me, I obviously hadn't backed up the
no, of course not.
the chapters I've written. So I thought, I've got to find an expert little shop in Harrogate, not one of the sort of like chain ones like Curry's. So I found a little expert shop, guys who win awards, but they act like the geeky guys in James Bond films or American spy thrillers who can crack any computer and hack into anything. Those sort of guys, really nice, really helpful. And they tried all the tricks. And they said, sadly, the hard drive's totally corrupted and we can't get anything off it. And I thought, oh
no.
Yeah. They said, but we do know a small firm in Norwich who work for the police quite often. And they're the sort of people that if the criminal has set fire to his phone or laptop with lighter fluid and sort of tried to burn it to a crisp, this is the firm that still gets the data off the burnt out phone or the burnt out laptop. So I said, I'll do it. So I sent my hard drive down by courier post to Norwich, and lo and behold, they did actually retrieve it. So
that's magnificent.
Having had about a month of thinking I'm going to have to start this book all over again. At the speed I'm writing this book, it'll take me a decade to write it, which is ridiculous. I mean, I'm not writing War and Peace. So it was such a massive relief to know that I hadn't, through my own laziness in retaining a heritage laptop, not ruined all the work.
So you're close, because you've been up in Scotland for a week, Graham, concentrating on writing it further. So how far do you feel this magnus opus on Magna Carta? Look what I did there.
I like it.
How close is it to being finished?
Well, ironically, I've now got to the end of 2020. So I started in 1942 when Chris was born in Harrogate, although he was raised in an old stone house from the 16th century above the hills of Burstwith. And he's a proper Dales person, but also a grammar school boy. He contains both things, which is the fundamental unique quality of Chris Simpson, who grew up in the folk revival boom of the 1960s, was that he genuinely came from the countryside and genuinely came from a farming background, but he also genuinely was a grammar school boy, and he genuinely did go to King's College in London to study divinity. So he didn't have to go to Cecil Sharp House and
No,
study
no, no,
English folk tradition because he was
no.
born into it. But then again,
Exactly.
he didn't have to go to art college to do anything because he was already a bit arty in some ways. So he's the
Yeah.
perfect combination. So ironically, I've now reached into 2020, and if I'd written the book in 1 year, which is what it should have taken, I'd be at the end of the book. But of course, things have happened since 2020. So
Yeah.
it's like if I don't finish the book at some point, I'll never finish the book. You know what I mean?
I think
Because
I think you do have to draw a line, don't you?
Well, I'm going to draw a line at their farewell tour in Holland in late 2022.
That seems good. That's a good place. In fact, that's perfect. That's the
Now
sign. That's the signing
that's
off
going to
of the Magna Carta.
yeah, exactly, and that's going to be the epilogue. So basically, I've got the epilogue, a third of the introduction, and a couple of little details to check, and that's the fairly. I think it's a fairly coherent first draft, completely finished.
Now, Graham, just in passing, I'm delighted to see a certain thing is returning to Harrogate, the Spiegel Tent.
Oh yes,
That is good
it's
news.
fun, and it's in Harrogate
And it's a wonderful venue. And the Spiegel Tent is one of my favorite experiences of going to shows that there can be.
Yeah, well, it's one of the few times when the festival really lets its hair down because
Exactly.
Harrogate National Festivals who do absolutely fantastic, really serious, high quality artistic events, and have done for 60 years or more. But the Spiegel Tent is the one time when they really let the hair down, and it's also the one time where members of the public come along to an event with no knowledge of the festival whatsoever, but they go along because it's fun, which is really important to the festival. It has that sort of audience as well.
Yeah, we might sort of look at it in more depth. I just sort of would mention it in passing. I haven't sort of got the details and the dates in front of me, but I was just really pleased to see that it's returning.
The Gypsy Queens are playing.
Yeah, they're coming back again, and they absolutely suit it. So that's in passing. Now, another thing that's happening in Graham is one of yours and my favourite galleries, the RedHouse Originals Art Gallery. Not for the first time, obviously, doing a music-related event, and I love this title. The Beatles Mad Day Out. So this is a preview of a new exhibition. When's it opening? And are the Beatles actually featuring it, or is that just an intriguing title?
No, it's they only do great events to RedHouse Originals. Exactly. A very small gallery that punches well above its weight and gets famous and important artists to exhibit there and to turn up in person. It also is very linked to rock and roll history and to current rock. I saw the Coral play a gig in the tiny gallery in the tens, and it was fantastic. And they had the Coral's artwork as well. They're a really cool gallery, and the Beatles Mad Day Out is famous. It's from the summer of '68 when the Beatles were recording the White Album, and they'd done Lady Madonna in February. Hey Jude was coming out in September, but in the summer they hadn't been seen in public in person for quite a long time. And in the '60s, if you were out of the public eye for a year, that was like a decade. Whereas nowadays people can wait for 5 years and come back, it's perfectly fine. In those days, a year out of the public eye in person was seen as something like you weren't playing the game anymore. So the Beatles decided to get photographs done properly in the summer around London. A set of playful photographs, and they hired Don McCullin, a really famous photographer in the '60s who specialised in Vietnam War photographs,
war photography,
and Middle East photographs, and poverty. So that's the Beatles. Will get a really proper photographer. So Don obviously does it, and he mainly takes black and white photographs. One of which turns up years later as the gatefold sleeve centerpiece of the Beatles 62-66 compilation and the Beatles 67 compilation. And it's a great black and white picture of the Beatles spread out within a packed crowd behind park railings, and the people among and beyond them and surround them are people of all ages, all backgrounds, all colours, all sorts of people, and the Beatles are dotted like they're just normal people amongst that. It's a brilliant image. It's got so many connotations to it if you bother to think about it. But anyway, this is not an exhibition of Don McCullin. This is his assistant, Tom Murray, who's a young guy at that point. But since then, he's taken photographs for every famous magazine in the entire world. He's a legend in photography. But then he was a young guy, acting as assistant to Don McCullin, and he decided when he was doing this to take a few rolls of colour footage himself. So these, I believe, are the only colour footage of the Beatles in the summer '68. And I think it's about 23 images they're showing at RedHouse Originals in Harrogate from April 19th. And they're very interesting photographs because they show the Beatles wearing quite interesting clothing between Flower Power and Woodstock.
Yeah.
And so they're interestingly dressed and very playful photographs that Tom's taken. And they can include a famous one which isn't shown very often because it shows the three Beatles, Paul, George, and Ringo, crowding round John, who's on the pavement below them. And they're looking at him like he's just died. And lo and behold, he's on the pavement like he's died. And considering he got assassinated in 1980, it's quite a hard image to look at without feeling something bad about it. So it's going to be a fantastic exhibition.
Is there an opening party, Greg?
There might be, but I've been so busy, I haven't worked out if I'm going or what I'm doing. But I usually do turn up, so I'm sure.
Well,
I'm sure
it's an exhibition that I will be definitely going to as well, and we might return to it actually once we've had the chance to see that.
Good idea.
Because we've got 1 minute 37 seconds left.
I also saw a 33-year-old singer-songwriter recently, Charles, and that was William Doyle, who played at the amazing venue Hyde Park Book Club in Leeds. A really cool venue. You think you're in Shoreditch when you walk in, but he was on his own with just a sax player and I think it was a cello. It was some other classical instrument. It was just him and this little bloke, and he was fantastic. And he's been fantastic ever since he got nominated for Mercury in 2014 for his Total Strife Forever album. And he managed to like blend pop with ambient and with sort of like slightly experimental avant-garde moments, but always with strong melody and always with emotion. And it sort of makes you think about things, but it doesn't come across in a depressing fashion. It's quite sort of like quietly joyous music. It's very English, slightly pastoral, even though it's mainly electronic. And it's like he's looking for sublime moments.
You've been listening to the podcast Two Big Egos in a Small Car. Your hosts were Graham Chalmers and Charles Hutchinson. This was a Baltic sub-production.